I'm Bill Grob, Director of the National Center for Supercomputing Applications at the University of Illinois and Vice Chair of SC20 Invited Talks. Welcome to the SC20 Invited Talks session on Extinction Rebellion. The overarching theme of SC20 is more than HPC. Complementing this theme, the Invited Talks collectively focus on applications and technologies impacting all areas of science, engineering, medicine, and society. Around SC19 last November, global efforts collectively labeled Extinction Rebellion captured our imaginations. HPC, from its inception, has played a central role in enabling breakthroughs in climate and weather modeling and environmental science. The distinguished speakers in this session will enlighten us on how our community can contribute to inter and multidisciplinary research initiatives with broad scientific and societal impact for future generations. Dalia Conde is the Director of Science at Species360, a leading data-driven conservation NGO, and Associate Professor at the University of Southern Denmark. Dalia has worked on different species management programs, such as the reintroduction of pronghorn antelopes in Mexico, and did her PhD studying jaguars in the Mayan rainforest. Passionate about the power of open data and high-performance computing, Dalia leads the New Species Knowledge Index Initiative and collaborates with a broad network of scientists, zoos, aquariums, conservation organizations, artists, and policymakers to revolutionize evidence-based animal welfare and conservation globally.
Hello, it is my great pleasure to be with all of you here today. I'm going to present three main things. First, what is extinction? Number two, why it's important and why we should care about it. And three, why I think this community is especially equipped to fight the current extinction crisis. So if we think about extinction, is part of the evolutionary process. Extinction is natural. I really love these figures from the book Through the Looking Glass. And it shows the red queen running. And Alice asked, why, if we're still running, we're in the same place? And basically, it is what happens to species. Species need to be constantly changing and adapting to the current environment. Why? Because it's the only way that they will not disappear. They need to react to all those changes, and it's part of the natural selection process. So if these extinctions have occurred through the history of our planet, how many extinctions can we expect? So we can expect that the natural extinction rate process, which we call the background extinction rate, is between, we can say 0.1 to 1 species per 100 years, per approximately 10 million species. So that will be a natural number of species that we can expect will disappear. And we have had what we call mass extinctions. And the planet has survived already 5 mass extinctions, which biodiversity has dropped from 50 to 95% of the species on planet Earth. These extinctions, it didn't matter how well the species were adapted to the changing conditions. In geological terms, the changes were so fast that these species couldn't cope and they disappear. With this massive species loss, we can see, for example, at the end of the Triassic, started the age of the reptiles. And at the end of the Cretaceous, with the famous extinction of dinosaurs, with the collapse or the shock of the meteorite in Chicxulub in the coast of Yucatan, it was the end of the age of the reptiles and started the diversification of mammals. We're living now at 6 max extinction. Why? Because the number of species that have become extinct surpass the extinction rate. As you can see in this graph, in the x-axis, we have periods of time. And since the 1500 to now, we have lost 338 species. The species loss start being almost exponential after the Industrial Revolution. And that's why we are living a mass extinction comparable to the extinctions to the previous extinctions I showed you in the previous graph. I really like this painting of Isabella Kirkland's, which shows 63 species that became extinct since the 1700s. And we're really aware of what is driving the loss of a species. Some of the main drivers are habitat loss and the fragmentation of habitats, pollution and detoxification of ecosystems, invasive species, which is a result of, for example, many of the species extinction in the early 1500s, because colonizers in their boats move rats, pigs, cats that arrive, for example, to Mauritius Island, causing the extinction of the dodo. So invasive species is a very big problem right now. Climate change, overharvesting, such as fisheries, and the illegal wildlife trade in the last 20 years has become a very big issue in terms of driving a species loss. We know about these drivers, and governments have put different targets in order to stop this decline. But as you can see in this newspaper article that was published 10 years ago, we didn't reach those targets. We failed to reduce the drivers that are causing this species decline. And just last month, this was in 15th of September, this was the headline of some news sections on environment, showing that we have again failed to meet every target to reduce this impact on species loss. So why are we failing to reach targets to maintain biodiversity, which is the basis of our survival as humans in this planet? Well, mainly it is because we are failing to value the economics of biodiversity and the ecosystems. We give for granted the oxygen we breathe, the water we drink, and the pollinators that make sure our crops can be harvested every year. And I had the opportunity to do a small contribution to this document that was published in 2008. And the big conclusion is that this lack of really recognizing within the main factors of social capital and human capital, the natural capital. Reducing natural capital only as domestic animals, the value of domestic animals, crops, and fisheries, but not all the other services that ecosystem provide for human survival. And for this reason, I have chosen COVID, because everybody is talking about it right now. And this is a very good way to show the economic impact of losing biodiversity and of the drivers of biodiversity that are encroaching species, ecosystems, and making us more susceptible to new emerging zoonotic diseases. With COVID-19, it is estimated that the economic impact by June of this year was of $5.3 trillion US dollars. And if we consider the social impact derived from deaths, from disabilities, and as well the long-term impact of education and in the industry, the losses go to $7 trillion US dollar, as reported last month by the GFinder report. So the linkage between these 6 mass extinction is one of the main sources of emerging infectious diseases. And I hope I will convince you why. So if we look at how much we're investing to tackle the problem of COVID right now, is around 7.6 billion US dollars up to September that this report was published. The investment in this epidemic or in this pandemic dwarfs any other investment to Ebola or other or SARS and other infectious diseases. But still, we're focusing on tackling the problem, but not the main roots of the problem we're having. We're not tackling the exposure that we're increasing humans to contact with the species that bring all these emerging zoonotic diseases. In the Global Risk Report from the World Economic Forum shows biodiversity as one of the main risk factors that we're going to have. And I think they were totally right about it. Because even if they didn't put infectious diseases or emerging diseases as one of the main factors, although they mention it as a function, biodiversity loss is at the core of where we're living right now. For example, habitat loss and fragmentation create new access to different wild species. Invasive species, we're moving a species from one ecosystem to another where it's naive, and that could really trigger new emerging diseases, such as the Hendra virus in 1994 in Australia. Overharvesting, the same. We are getting more in contact with wildlife, and the illegal wildlife trade, which implies not only contact with wildlife, but moving wildlife across the globe to supply different markets that want a very big array of products. So for COVID, the main suspect is the pangolin. A study shows that it is highly probable that it was a bat that was the reservoir host of the virus, of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. And the intermediate host between bats and humans, all the evidence up to now points out that was a pangolin. And these species are the most traded mammal illegally in the international markets. They're looking for their scales. In many places, it's believed that they have powers, magical powers, but as well curative powers, and is used in some traditional medicine. And their meat is highly prized as a delicacy in Southeast Asia and China. But if we think about our increased contact to wildlife, the connection is really clear on the emergence of infection diseases, because 60% of all human infections come from animals. And this is just an example of a recent trip I had, well, not that recent, was in 2018, into the market of Bangkok. And what I want to share with you is the amount of different species, but as well the conditions that we have found in which all these animals are exposed to, which are not, they don't comply with any welfare standards, but as well in terms of health, it's really terrible. So you can find many different types of animals, some that are illegal in the market and some that could be captive bred and maybe legal. It is really shocking to go to this market and find a species that come, for example, that is Arab macaw that comes all the way from Central America, and you can acquire it in Southeast Asia. Many of these is quite certain that are not legally traded, especially by the amount of seizures and confiscation of different animals in different countries around the world. In fact, the illegal wildlife trade is a multi-billion-dollar industry that is really threatening the survival of many species. And this visit in the market was not only shocking to me, but the worst was the Monday after, in which all those animals that were not sold and were not and didn't survive, they're all mixed together and put in a big pile of trash. And you can imagine not only the bad handling of these animals when so many are dead, but as well the exposure to zoonotic diseases that this can bring to all of us. I just wanted to share with you this, that even in the decoration section of the market, you can see you can buy a polar bear, which I was quite surprised. So going back to zoonotic diseases, from the 60% that we know they're transmitted by animals, more than 2/3 of those are from wild species, meaning that they're not from the usual domestic species we have more contact with. And the fact that we're encroaching habitats, as it can be seen in this image from Landsat, this satellite image, we are not only affecting the habitat of those species, but we're entering new areas, like in this tropical rainforest, that increase the contact with those species. And this, of course, increases our exposure and increases the emerging zoonotic diseases. And we can see in this timeline that since 1918, we didn't see pandemics until really 2003. And well, we can talk about the Hendra virus in 1994. But the main emerging zoonotic diseases have been happening more and more frequently in the last 20 years. And this is related to all the pressure we're putting on wildlife and on their habitats and on the ecosystems globally. For this, we have new initiatives like the Global Initiative to End Wildlife Crime that wants to include, that governments include under the Convention of the International Trade of Endangered Species, which regulates all the legally exchange or trade of animals and plants internationally. But the way the convention is set up today is to ensure that the international trade do not affect the sustainability of the populations of those species in their natural habitats. However, the fact that some of those species may be vectors or host of zoonotic diseases is not included. So one of these initiatives is to push CITES to include this as part of the convention. The other initiative is to make the wildlife crime part of the United Nations protocols. And this will be extremely important together with other international crimes such as human trafficking and firearms, the trade of firearms. As you can see, the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime as well published a document in which they state why preventing future pandemics is highly related to increasing the security on the illegal wildlife trade. So where does big data come in this picture? And where do you come in this picture? Well, we know that the extinction crisis is not natural. We have the extinction rates being higher of what should be under the background rate. We know that nature has a high value, and one of the things we're showing is with COVID. And we know we have today the technology to really start tackling this extinction crisis. And I really love this cartoon by Terry Gregorius that shows the politics of data. why having all this information for every individual can be a little bit scary. For example, for this man entering the European Union. But what if we could use this fourth industrial revolution to be able to tackle the extinction crisis? For example, the Convention of the International Trade of Endangered Species, they have to decide which species they need to list and protect and regulate internationally. However, it's very hard to get the data that you need to make this decision-making process. What if for every species, we could make this data available to policymakers and scientists or conservation practitioners to get it right away? So, of course, this is a dream, and this is why we started an initiative that is called the Species Knowledge Index. And under this initiative, what we want to do is we want to use all the data that biologists have been collecting for years and have been putting already in open data repositories. What we want to do is to include information not only on the species biology, but information on their habitat threats, information on if the species is tackled by the illegal wildlife trade or if there is evidence that is tackled by the illegal wildlife trade. We want to know about their genomics. We want to know if the species is listed under the IUCN Red List of Threatened Species. We want to know about their viruses. Can they be host or cargo of zoonotic diseases? We want to know if there is an international regulation, etc. So there are thousands of databases that have information about many different aspects that are essential to have integrated and combined and standardized in order to support decisions to manage and save these species from extinction. So we're working to not only develop this index, but to map the knowledge we have about a species across different areas of information, from biology to legislation to management plans that are being developed, to how much these species are being sold in the black market, sometimes on their platforms like Facebook. How can we combine all this data? So by this, we really like this concept by David McCandless that he published in his book, Knowledge is Beautiful. And where we're right now in this map is that with the Species Knowledge Index, the first thing we did is to use all that information that has already structured and standardized and contextualized in different open data repositories into develop a first index, which we call the Demographic Index of Species Knowledge. And for this, we focus on trying to map the knowledge on a species fertility and survival. And we did this for terrestrial vertebrates covering mammals, birds, reptiles, and amphibians. So it's more than 35,000 species. And the big challenge was, how can we interconnect all these databases when the names of the species are changing constantly, which is their taxonomy, and which all these databases, they use different terminology, sometimes to address the same things. So we work in this in this area of knowledge as our first prototype. And we develop a very simple way to measure how much do we know about their fertility, which is what you see in the blues, which is what is the clutch size of a species, or the litter size, which is the age of reproduction, and as well on mortality or their survival, which is the inverse of mortality, which is how long can this species live, what is the juvenile survival, etc. So the colors in the red are for mortality, colors in blue are for fertility. The mix is when you have both types of knowledge, and what you see in pink is when you have the highest amount of knowledge, which means you don't only know the species average fertility or survival or mortality, but you know which is the probability of a species to move from a stage, for example, of subadult to become an adult, and of an adult to reproduce, and of that egg being able to be recruited as a juvenile. So you know the whole life cycle. Why did we start with this data? Because it's data essential to do management plans to save a species from extinction. If you know that the fertility rate is lower than the mortality rate, then populations will collapse. So we map this knowledge for more than 35,000 species, and is what you're seeing here in this figure. And I think this is beautiful, although we found a lot of gaps. In the top, in the panel A, you can see the knowledge for all reptiles. In B, you can see mammals, which is the species that we have the most knowledge. Then in C, birds, where you see a lot of blue, and blue goes for knowledge on fertility. A lot of that blue is clutch size. And D is amphibians, which is the most empty taxa with knowledge, which is really worrisome because 1 of every 4 amphibians are threatened with extinction. So we found these gaps, and the next step was to say, how can we fill those gaps? And then we found that if we use data from zoos and aquariums, we can increase our knowledge from 1.3% to 15%. And although this data doesn't come from wild populations, it is information that could be really important to understand the biology of these species. But this is only one area of knowledge, is demography. And we wanted to map many other areas. So the idea is, how can we integrate different types of information that can be key to make plans to save a species from extinction and to develop international regulations to ensure that happens. So this is from linking the information that was the Species Knowledge Index. Now we're trying to map across many different areas of knowledge. And we are doing this now for our first prototype, which is the Sunbirds. And why Sunbirds? Well, there are 6,000 species of passerines, which are the Sunbirds. And this taxa is really targeted for singing competitions all around the world. Singing competitions in Asia are very famous, but as well in Europe, there are very important singing competitions in which species are being extracted from the heart of the rainforest all over the world to be able to compete in these forums that are driving many of these species to extinction. However, since 1975, when the Convention of the International Trade started, there is a very big good monitoring of how the trade in terms of imports and exports has been happening for those species. But we know that many more species are being traded, but we need to say which ones and which need to be listed under this international legislation. And here we're combining knowledge from what we call the Sunbirds in Trade database that is trying to assess all those species that are not in the convention. We're including how perceived the trade is, if the trade is affecting the sustainability of the species in the area, and as well how threatened is globally the species, how vulnerable to climate change. And we're combining this with many other information, such as confiscation that has been traced by the organization named Traffic, confiscations that have been found by the United Nations organizations in Office of Drugs and Crime. And I just wanted to put some pictures of my team who are analyzing all the data, and from our species knowledge expert on sunbirds, who is leading all the sunbirds expert to get to this knowledge. So by integrating all this information, our goal is to provide to the CITES Animals Committee and to the CITES Secretariat pinpointing some species that more research needs to be done to decide if the listing should be developed. So now we are mapping the knowledge, but if we map this knowledge, we have a big problem still. Every year, or every month, or every day in some cases, the status of these species will change. The demand for these species will increase or decrease, and we need to track that. And the index as we have it today and how we're mapping knowledge is static. We need to do a process that is mostly alive, that we can go to all these databases, digest the information, and be able to process it and to develop different type of analytics that can support scientists and policymakers and conservation practitioners to really advance how we're tackling the extinction crisis with hard data and information. And for this, I believe this community is especially situated. And that's why I would like to thank the invitation to this conference. And I would like to end that talk to letting you know that although we're losing a lot of species and the outlook is really bleak, we are very lucky that this extinction crisis is not being driven by massive volcanic eruptions or meteorite showers. This extinction crisis is driven by us, by human activities. And that means that we can change it. And that means that we can stop it and we can really reduce the current biodiversity loss. During the last 2 decades, we have failed to reach the biodiversity targets to slow this extinction trend. But in the next 10 years, the page is empty and we can change what it will be written by all these newspapers. And I really believe this community has a lot to provide to really reduce the species loss we're facing right now. Thank you.